Welcome back, everyone. We've had some pretty intense deep dives lately.
We have.
Majorana fermions,
Yeah.
the Riemann hypothesis,
Uh-huh.
even Wolfram's universe.
It's been a lot.
It's enough to make you step back and go, okay, where are we going next?
Mhm.
But I promise you, this one's going to be good. It takes those quantum cosmic vibes that we've been exploring, and it brings in some fresh number theory wonders
Yeah.
that I think are going to blow your mind.
It's amazing how it all connects.
It really is. Remember how we've been talking about Fibonacci sequences, binary sequences?
Yes.
That wild multiplicative order modulo n thing,
Oh, yeah.
even random polynomials?
Yeah.
All these things that seem so different. They all weave together, don't they?
Like a hidden tapestry.
Exactly. And that interconnectedness is what makes this next stop on our journey so fascinating. We're about to tackle what mathematicians playfully call the monster problem, a challenge that bridges the elegance of geometry with these powerful recursive sequences that we've been exploring. Okay, before we wrestle with this monster, though, I think we need to lay some groundwork.
Yeah.
And first up, we need to get a handle on this intriguing concept called the Zeckendorf expansion.
So imagine like the binary system on steroids. You know how binary uses powers of 2 to represent any number? Like 101 in binary is 5 because it's 1 times 2 squared plus 0 times 2 to the first power plus 1 times 2 to the 0th power.
The foundation of our digital world.
The Zeckendorf expansion does something very similar, but instead of powers of 2, it uses Fibonacci numbers. So instead of 1, 2, 4, 8, you're working with 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and so on. And the really surprising thing is that any number can be uniquely represented as a sum of non-consecutive Fibonacci numbers.
Okay, I need an example.
Okay.
Because this sounds a little mind-bending.
Okay. So let's take the number 10.
Okay.
So let's take the number 10.
Okay.
In the Zeckendorf expansion, you wouldn't use 5 plus 5 because
Yeah.
those are consecutive Fibonacci numbers. Instead, you represent 10 as 8 plus 2.
Oh, okay.
See, it's like this hidden code within the familiar Fibonacci sequence.
That is pretty neat. Okay, so where does this monster come into all of this?
The paper we're diving into today explores this really surprising connection between prime numbers, those building blocks of multiplication, and their Zeckendorf digits. It's as if these two very fundamental concepts are suddenly talking to each other in a new language.
Now, that's what I call through-the-looking-glass material.
Precisely. And what makes it so compelling is this interplay between additive and multiplicative structures. Prime numbers are all about multiplication, while the Zeckendorf representation is about addition, but somehow they're intertwined.
So it's like mathematicians are discovering this secret conversation between these two seemingly different worlds of numbers.
Exactly. And the paper actually draws a really interesting parallel to a set of problems known as Gelfand's problem.
Like Gelfand's problems.
Yeah, which deal with the digits of prime numbers in base Q expansions, like base 10, the one we use every day.
Yeah.
Mathematicians are always on the hunt for patterns in the distribution of primes. And Gelfand's problems, I think, really highlight just how tricky that can be, especially when you're dealing with what we call sparse sets of numbers.
Hold on. Sparse sets.
Okay.
Can you unpack that for me a bit?
So imagine you're looking for prime numbers, but only within all the even numbers.
Okay.
Even numbers are only half of all the numbers out there, right?
Yeah.
So in a way, they're a sparse set compared to all the whole numbers. Finding primes within that limited set, it becomes more challenging.
I got it. So it's not just about finding patterns in prime numbers,
Right.
but finding them in specific, sometimes very limited sets of numbers.
Exactly. Now, to make things even more intriguing, let's throw in this really mind-boggling concept called the Sarnac conjecture.
Ooh, I do love a good conjecture. Lay it on me.
This conjecture, it proposes this connection between seemingly random systems and their underlying structure.
Okay.
It involves something called the Möbius function.
Okay.
But the key takeaway is that even simple patterns, like whether the Zeckendorf sum of digits is odd or even, can reveal these deep mathematical truths about how prime numbers are distributed.
Okay, that's pretty wild. We're talking about patterns within patterns here, right?
Exactly. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Remember, we're on this journey towards this monster problem. And to get there, we need to explore some even stranger mathematical territory. The paper introduces this idea of morphic words, which are like instructions for building sequences. So imagine taking the Zeckendorf representation of a number and applying the substitution rule, like replacing everyone with 1 and every 0 with 10.
So you're basically creating a new sequence based on this rule.
Yes.
I'm starting to see how this is building on the ideas that we've talked about.
And these morphic words are very intricately linked to the Zeckendorf expansion. Mathematicians get really excited about studying the different patterns that emerge in these sequences.
This is where I start to get that mind-bending feeling we were talking about earlier. We're like zooming in on this like microscopic structure of numbers. And we're just finding these hidden codes everywhere we look.
You're catching on quickly. And remember, working with Zeckendorf digits directly can be tricky because of something called inverse carry propagation. Think of it like trying to solve a puzzle, but the pieces are shifting around as you're working on it.
Okay, that sounds messy. How do mathematicians even begin to tackle that?
That's where things get really sophisticated. To get around this problem, mathematicians often move to a continuous version of the problem.
A continuous version.
Yeah, using concepts like discrepancy and uniform distribution. So instead of focusing on these individual numbers and digits, they zoom out to look at the bigger picture, using the tools of calculus and analysis.
So we're talking about bridging the gap between the discrete world of individual numbers
Yes.
and the continuous world of, like, functions and curves.
That's the heart of it. It's like taking a mosaic and you step back to appreciate the overall image instead of focusing on each individual tile. And one of the key tools that lets mathematicians do this is something called the Cuxma-Hlaka inequality.
Another mouthful. But if it helps us understand the monster problem, I'm all ears.
This inequality, it acts like a mathematical bridge, connecting these discrete sums we've been talking about to continuous integrals. It's a very powerful tool that lets mathematicians bring the elegant machinery of calculus to bear on these discrete number theory problems.
That's a pretty amazing feat. I'm really starting to see how these seemingly disparate concepts are all coming together.
And that's just the beginning.
Oh, no.
To delve even deeper into the monster problem, we need to explore even more powerful tools. Are you ready to take the plunge?
I'm ready. Let's dive in.
And one of those tools is called a Gowers norm, and it might surprise you to learn that it's connected to Zeckendorf digits.
Okay, now that does sound surprising. Gowers norms sound like something you'd use to measure how level a surface is, not something related to number theory.
That's what makes this so fascinating. Gowers norms are actually developed in a completely different area of math, but they've found these unexpected applications in number theory, particularly in relation to the Zeckendorf expansions. Mathematicians stumbled upon this secret passage connecting these two seemingly unrelated areas.
So what exactly do Gowers norms measure in the context of the Zeckendorf expansion?
They essentially help us quantify the randomness of a function.
Okay.
Think of it like this. If you were to plot the values of a function on a graph, a truly random function would just produce this scatter of points with no discernible pattern. A Gowers norm gives us a way to measure how close a function is to that ideal of randomness.
But isn't it counterintuitive that a tool for measuring randomness is connected to something as structured as the Fibonacci sequence and the Zeckendorf expansion?
That's what makes this discovery so remarkable. It suggests that there's this deeper level of order hidden within these seemingly chaotic systems. It's like finding a perfectly symmetrical snowflake in the midst of a blizzard.
That's a great analogy. So how do Gowers norms actually help us understand the monster problem?
Remember how we talked about moving from the discrete world of individual numbers to this continuous world of functions? Gowers norms are particularly useful in that continuous setting. They help us analyze the behavior of functions along arithmetic progressions.
Those sequences where the difference between consecutive numbers is constant. 2, 4, 6, 8.
Exactly. And to quantify how well-behaved a function is along these arithmetic progressions, we have this concept called the level of distribution.
Level of distribution.
Yeah. A high level of distribution indicates greater uniformity, meaning the function's values are spread out evenly along those progressions.
So a function with a high level of distribution would be, like, more predictable in a sense.
Precisely. And here's the kicker. The paper shows that the Zeckendorf sum of digits function, the one that tells us how to represent a number using Fibonacci numbers, has a level of distribution of 1.
Wow, that's unexpected. What does that tell us about the Zeckendorf expansion?
It suggests that the Zeckendorf expansion, despite its seemingly quirky nature,
Yeah.
actually exhibits this surprising degree of regularity.
Yep.
When we analyze it through the lens of these sophisticated tools, it's like discovering that a seemingly chaotic piece of abstract art actually follows this hidden mathematical blueprint.
This is why I love these deep dives.
Yeah.
It's incredible how mathematicians can uncover these hidden connections between these seemingly unrelated areas of math.
Indeed. And this connection between Gowers norms and the Zeckendorf expansion, I think, hints at the power of these tools to unlock the secrets of this monster problem. Now, I know we've thrown a lot of complex concepts at you.
We have.
And the paper itself delves even deeper into the mathematical weeds with things like sums of type 2.
Don't worry, I trust you're not going to quiz me on the finer points of sums of type 2.
No.
But it's reassuring to know that there's even more to explore for those who are, like, mathematically inclined.
Absolutely. But for our purposes, what's important is that these sums of type 2, they're like essential ingredients in the proofs of the paper's main theorems. They're part of the mathematical machinery that makes it all work.
So we're like standing on the shoulders of giants here, benefiting from the work of mathematicians who have come before us.
Exactly. And what's even more exciting is that this paper doesn't just stop at Fibonacci numbers. It explores a whole class of sequences called Fibonacci-like sequences.
Oh, that's right. We touched on that earlier. It's like taking the basic blueprint of the Fibonacci sequence
Right.
and tweaking it slightly
Yeah.
to create new and fascinating variation.
Precisely.
Right.
For example, you have the Jacobson numbers, where instead of adding the previous two numbers, you add the previous number and twice the one before that.
Okay.
So it goes like 0, 1, 1, 3, 5, 11. And you also have things like Pell numbers, which are another very intriguing Fibonacci-like sequence.
I'm sensing a pattern here. It's mathematicians love to take a good idea and just see how far they can stretch it, creating these whole new families of numbers based on this simple rule.
You got it. And by exploring these variations on the Fibonacci theme, mathematicians can test the robustness of their theories, right?
Yeah.
Do the patterns and connections we see in the Fibonacci sequence, do they hold true for these other sequences? It's like a grand experiment in the laboratory of numbers.
So we're not just diving deep into one specific problem. We're like exploring this whole universe of interconnected ideas.
And that's the beauty of mathematics. A single question can lead us down this rabbit hole of interconnected concepts, revealing hidden patterns and unexpected relationships.
I'm starting to get a sense of what the monster in the monster problem might refer to. It's not just a single problem. It's this whole web of interconnected challenges and mysteries.
That's a great way to put it. The monster problem is less about finding a single answer and more about understanding the deep structure of numbers and shapes, how they relate to each other, and the surprising connections that emerge when we start, like, digging beneath the surface.
Okay, I'm officially hooked. But before we get too lost in the mathematical weeds, can you give us a sense of where this is all heading? What's the ultimate goal of tackling the monster problem?
The ultimate goal is to uncover a profound truth about the universe of numbers and shapes. It's a journey of discovery that will take us through some of the most fascinating areas of mathematics, from the discrete world of number theory to the continuous world of calculus and analysis. And along the way, we'll encounter some truly mind-bending concepts that will challenge our understanding of what's possible in the realm of mathematics.
I'm ready for the challenge.
Yeah,
Let's continue our exploration of the monster problem.
Yeah, it's like we're setting out on an expedition into uncharted territory, equipped with the tools and insights of generations of mathematicians who have come before us.
I love that analogy. We're explorers in the world of numbers, seeking out new patterns and connections that could revolutionize our understanding of math and perhaps even the universe itself.
And who knows what wonders we might find along the way. The beauty of mathematics lies in its ability to surprise us, to challenge our assumptions, and lead us down these unexpected paths.
Thinking back to where we started with those mind-bending concepts of Majorana fermions, the Riemann hypothesis, Wolfram's universe, it's amazing to see how these, like, seemingly...
It's a testament to the unity of knowledge, how insights from one field can illuminate mysteries in another. The journey we've taken through Fibonacci sequences, binary sequences, that wild multiplicative order modulo n, and even random polynomials has all been leading up to this point, to this grand challenge of the monster problem.
And the key takeaway, at least for me, is this idea of merging the discrete and the continuous. We started with the discrete world of individual numbers and their Zeckendorf representations, but then we ventured into the continuous realm of functions, Gowers norms, the Cosmopolitan inequality. It's like we've been blurring the lines between these two fundamental ways of looking at the world.
And that's precisely where the true power of mathematics lies, in its ability to bridge those gaps, to reveal the hidden connections between these seemingly disparate concepts. The monster problem embodies that spirit, pushing us to think beyond traditional boundaries and embrace the interconnectedness of mathematical ideas.
So for those of us who aren't professional mathematicians,
Yeah.
what's the takeaway here? Why should we care about the monster problem and all these intricate concepts?
Because at its heart, the monster problem is about seeking patterns and understanding structure. It's about pushing the limits of human knowledge and exploring the profound beauty that lies hidden within this seemingly abstract, and who knows, the insights gained from tackling these challenges could have far-reaching implications, perhaps even shaping our understanding of the fundamental laws of the universe.
I have to admit, I'm still wrapping my head around everything we've covered today.
Yeah.
It's a lot to process, but I'm definitely leaving with a renewed sense of wonder and a deeper appreciation for the incredible power of mathematics.
And that's all we can ask for, to keep that sense of wonder alive, to never stop questioning and exploring. The world of numbers is vast and full of mysteries, waiting for us to unravel them.
Absolutely. So keep those browns stretching, keep those minds expanding, and who knows what mathematical adventures await us in the future. Until next time, deep divers, keep exploring.
Farewell, and may your curiosity lead you to even greater discoveries.
Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into something you might think you already know pretty well?
Yeah.
We're talking about Fibonacci sequences.
Ah, yeah, the Fibonacci sequence.
But trust me,
It's a classic.
we're going way beyond the basics today.
Oh, yeah.
The spiral and all that.
Right.
But you've given us a whole stack of research and articles that show how this seemingly simple sequence connects to some pretty mind-blowing stuff.
I'm intrigued.
We're talking about connections to geometry puzzles, binary code,
Yeah.
even cryptography.
See, this is what I love about the Fibonacci sequence.
Yeah?
It just keeps revealing these unexpected connections to other areas of math.
It's like this hidden code
Yeah.
that unlocks all these deeper understandings.
It really is. It's like a key that unlocks the patterns and structures all around us.
It's a journey that's going to make us think differently about math, I think.
Oh, absolutely. We'll be exploring the elegance of these theoretical concepts,
Right.
but also their practical applications
Exactly.
in various fields.
Okay, so let's start with something called the Fibonacci trick.
Okay.
Now imagine you have a sequence
Yeah.
where each number is the sum of the two before it.
Just like the Fibonacci sequence.
Exactly like the Fibonacci sequence. So if you add up the first 10 numbers in this sequence, you get a specific result. And the trick is,
Okay.
that result is always 11 times the seventh number in the sequence.
And what's fascinating about that?
Right.
It's not just a random coincidence.
Oh, really?
No, it's a direct result of how these types of sequences are structured.
Okay.
They're known as second-order linear recurrences, and their very nature leads to these surprising shortcuts.
Okay, so it's not magic,
No,
it's math.
it's math.
But how does this trick actually help us solve problems? One of the sources you shared presents a really interesting geometric problem
Right.
that I thought was really cool.
Yeah, it involves a rectangle
Okay.
where the length of its sides and diagonals are all determined by sums of different sequences. Fibonacci, Pell, Jacobs-Stahl, even the Fibonacci sequence.
Whoa. Okay, that sounds complicated.
It is a bit intricate, but stick with me.
Okay.
Inside this rectangle is a specific triangle,
Right.
and the challenge is to figure out its area. Now, you could try to calculate it the long way, adding up all the terms and using geometric formulas.
Yeah, that sounds tedious.
It would be quite tedious.
But there's a shortcut.
Yes.
Does it involve our Fibonacci trick?
Exactly. By applying the fact that the sum of the first 10 terms of our Fibonacci-like sequence is 11 times the seventh term, we can simplify the area calculation for that triangle significantly.
That's awesome.
It's a very elegant shortcut.
Right.
That saves us from a ton of brute force calculations.
So we're using a property of the Fibonacci sequence to solve a problem in geometry.
Precisely.
I'm starting to see how these connections work.
Yeah.
But why is the Fibonacci sequence so special in this case? What about those other sequences like Pell or Jacobs-Stahl?
That's a great question. And what makes this even more interesting is that those other sequences don't have this elegant shortcut for their 10-term sums.
Oh, wow.
The Fibonacci sequence has this unique property that makes it particularly useful in this scenario.
Okay, so We've gone from Fibonacci spirals to geometric shortcuts. But are you ready for a real mind bender?
Hit me with it.
Okay. Can you imagine connecting something as organic as the Fibonacci sequence to the digital world of ones and zeros?
It might seem like a leap, but there's a fascinating link there.
Yeah.
And it all starts with looking at the Fibonacci sequence modulo 2.
Modulo 2.
Now, before you think I'm throwing out jargon,
I was going to say, break that down for me.
it's actually pretty straightforward. Modulo 2 simply means we're focusing on whether each Fibonacci number is even or odd.
Okay.
If it's odd, we represent it with a 1. If it's even, it's a 0.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So we're essentially turning the Fibonacci sequence into a binary code.
Precisely. And when you do this, you start to see patterns emerge. These binary sequences derived from the Fibonacci sequence actually have applications in cryptography and computer science.
Well, so the Fibonacci sequence, something found in nature,
Yeah,
can help us create secure codes.
it is. And that brings us to another interesting sequence highlighted in your materials, the Thumor sequence.
Okay, the Thumor sequence. Tell me more about that one.
Imagine a secret code hidden within a simple pattern. That's what the Thumor sequence is like.
Okay.
It's built using a substitution rule. You start with either a 0 or a 1, then replace every 0 with 0, 1, and every 1 with 10.
Got it.
You just keep repeating that pattern.
So you just keep applying that rule over and over. Sounds simple enough, but I bet it gets complex quickly.
You got it. What's fascinating about the Thumor sequence is that it's both predictable because of that simple rule and unpredictable because it never repeats the same pattern exactly.
So it's like controlled chaos.
Yeah.
That sounds perfect for cryptography.
Exactly. It's like creating a maze with a secret path that only the intended recipient can decipher. The Thumor sequence provides that kind of controlled unpredictability.
This is blowing my mind.
Yeah.
We've gone from Fibonacci spirals in nature to secret codes in the digital world. It's amazing how these abstract mathematical ideas have such real-world applications. But before we go any further, I think we need to understand this whole concept of modulo arithmetic a bit better. You mentioned modulo 2,
Right.
but what about other moduli? Can you break that down for me and for our listeners who might be wondering the same thing?
Absolutely. You've hit on a key concept here. Thinking in terms of modulo is like shifting our perspective. It's like going from a world of smooth, infinite possibilities to a world of distinct countable units.
So it's like imposing a digital lens on a continuous concept.
That's a great way to put it. And this shift to discrete thinking is essential for understanding not just cryptography, but many other areas of computer science and mathematics as well.
Okay, I'm starting to see the power of this discrete approach, but I'm still a bit fuzzy on how it connects to cryptography specifically. Can you give us a concrete example?
Sure. In cryptography, we often work with extremely large numbers and complex calculations by using a specific modulo.
Yeah.
We can essentially shrink those big numbers down to something more manageable, all within a well-defined system.
So it's like creating a secure mathematical playground with its own set of rules.
Exactly. And by carefully selecting that modulo and understanding how numbers behave within that system, we can create encryption and decryption algorithms that are both efficient and secure.
This is fascinating. We've gone from Fibonacci spirals in nature to secret codes in the digital world.
Yeah.
It's like math is the key to unlocking these hidden connections and solving real-world problems.
And we're just getting started. There's another concept closely tied to modulo arithmetic that's worth exploring: multiplicative order.
Okay, bring it on. I'm ready for more.
Multiplicative order might sound a bit intimidating,
Okay.
but it's actually quite elegant. Think of it like a clock. We start at the number 1 and keep multiplying by a specific number, let's say 2. We get 2, 4, 8, and eventually we cycle back to 1.
Okay.
Multiplicative order tells us how many steps it takes to complete that cycle.
So it's like a clock for multiplication.
Yeah.
But instead of hours, we're looking at the steps it takes to cycle back to 1.
Precisely. And what's really fascinating is how this concept of multiplicative order connects to the distribution of values in the Fibonacci sequence when we view them modulo a specific number.
Okay, now you're going to have to break that down for me. How does multiplicative order relate to the Fibonacci sequence in a modulo world?
Think about it this way. Multiplicative order is all about cyclical patterns.
Okay.
And when we look at the Fibonacci sequence modulo, a specific number, we're essentially looking at how those cyclical patterns from the multiplicative order interact with the inherent structure of the Fibonacci sequence itself.
So we're analyzing the footprints of Fibonacci in a modular world.
That's a great way to put it, and this analysis can actually lead to some surprising insights.
Like what? Give me an example.
For instance, multiplicative order can help us understand the distribution of something called the Zeckendorf sum of digits function, but viewed modulo a specific number.
Hold on, you're throwing a lot at me here. What in the world is the Zeckendorf sum of digits function?
Don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. The Zeckendorf sum of digits function, which we can call Zn for short, simply tells you how many Fibonacci numbers you need to add up to represent a given number n. It's based on the idea that any positive integer can be uniquely represented as a sum of non-consecutive Fibonacci numbers.
Okay, so it's like finding the most efficient way to build a number using Fibonacci blocks. But how does this connect back to multiplicative order? You said we were looking at its distribution modulo m.
Exactly, by applying multiplicative order to the Zeckendorf function. But in a modulo world, we're basically figuring out how these Fibonacci building blocks are spread out within a specific modular system. It gives us a new way to understand the deeper structure and patterns within the Fibonacci sequence itself.
Wow, my brain is doing some serious gymnastics trying to keep up. It's incredible how all of these seemingly abstract concepts are interconnected.
I know, right? And we're not done yet. Remember that paper on random polynomials you included in your stack?
Yes. I'm really curious about that one. It seems completely different from what we've been talking about.
It might seem that way at first glance,
Yeah.
but it actually ties into this theme of order versus chaos that we've been exploring.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. How do random polynomials fit into all of this?
We've been talking about these elegant mathematical sequences and structures,
Right.
but the real world isn't always so neat and predictable.
Right.
Sometimes there's an element of randomness that we need to account for,
For sure.
and that's where random polynomials come in.
Okay, I'm ready for the next layer. Bring on the random polynomials.
It's fascinating how we've gone from these seemingly abstract mathematical sequences to the idea of randomness.
It is.
It really highlights that math isn't just about theoretical concepts. It's also a powerful tool for understanding and describing the world around us, even the unpredictable parts.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been talking about these elegant patterns and structures, but real life often throws us curveballs, right?
Exactly.
Things don't always fit neatly into those perfect mathematical boxes.
Exactly. And that's where random polynomials come into play. They allow us to model uncertainty and incorporate randomness into our mathematical descriptions of real-world phenomena.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get the big picture here, but can you give me a more concrete example of how this actually works?
Sure.
Like, how do engineers, for instance, use random polynomials in their work?
Let's think about something like bridge design. Engineers use polynomial equations to model the stresses and strains on different parts of a bridge.
Okay.
They need to ensure that the bridge can withstand the weight of traffic, wind forces, and other environmental factors.
So they're using math to make sure the bridge doesn't collapse.
Exactly.
That's a pretty important job.
It is. And the roots of those polynomials, the values that make the equation equal to 0, represent critical points where the behavior of the bridge might change significantly.
So the polynomials help engineers predict and control the behavior of these complex systems, making sure they're safe and functional. But you mentioned randomness.
Yeah.
How does that fit into the equation?
In a perfect world, the engineers would have all the information they need to create a precise model of the bridge and its environment.
Right.
But the real world is full of uncertainties.
Yeah, of course.
Think about wind gusts, for example. They're unpredictable and can put sudden, uneven stresses on the bridge.
You can't perfectly predict exactly when and how strong a gust of wind will be.
Exactly. And that's where random polynomials come in. They help engineers model these unpredictable factors and assess the overall reliability of the bridge, even in the face of those uncertainties.
So it's like acknowledging that there's always an element of chaos in the real world. And we can actually use math to understand and manage that chaos. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
It is. And this brings us back to that paper on the number of real roots of random polynomials. It's exploring how we can predict the behavior of these complex systems, even when randomness is involved.
That makes a lot more sense now. It's like finding patterns within chaos. We've gone from Fibonacci spirals in nature to secret codes to engineering marvels, and now we're talking about predicting chaos with math.
Yeah.
It seems like all these different concepts are interconnected in some way.
They are. And I think a big part of that connection has to do with the idea of discrete versus continuous mathematics, something we touched upon earlier. Remember how we talked about modulo thinking shifting from a world of infinite possibilities to a world of distinct units?
Yes. It's like imposing a digital lens on a continuous concept. And that shift seems fundamental to so many areas of math and its applications.
Exactly. You have computer science relying heavily on discrete math, while fields like calculus and physics often deal with continuous functions. It's like we have these two different lenses for looking at the world, revealing different patterns and relationships.
And the fascinating thing is that the concepts we've been discussing today seem to bridge the gap between those two lenses.
I completely agree. Take the Fibonacci sequence, for example.
Yeah.
We can visualize it as a continuous spiral,
Right.
but we can also break it down into discrete units and explore its properties in the modulo world.
And even with random polynomials, we're dealing with continuous functions.
Yeah.
But we're trying to understand how they behave when faced with discrete, unpredictable events. It's like that line between discrete and continuous isn't always so clear-cut.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's more of a spectrum, and a lot of the math we've been discussing today falls somewhere along that spectrum. It's what makes this whole exploration so fascinating, don't you think?
Absolutely. I'm really starting to grasp the bigger picture here. We've talked about how these concepts apply to design, architecture, and engineering. What other real-world applications can you share with us? I'm ready for more.
How about we venture into the world of financial markets? Believe it or not, Fibonacci sequences and the golden ratio have actually been used by some traders to analyze and try to predict stock market trends.
Wait, are you serious? You're telling me math can predict the stock market? I'm skeptical, but also very intrigued.
Of course, it's not that simple. Countless factors influence stock prices, and no mathematical formula can guarantee you'll get rich quick.
Right.
But some traders believe that they can identify certain patterns in price movements
Okay.
using Fibonacci ratios and sequences.
Okay, I'm all ears. How does that work?
One common technique is to use something called Fibonacci retracement levels.
Okay.
These levels are based on the idea that after a significant price move, whether up or down the market, tends to retrace a portion of that move before continuing in the original direction.
So it's like a temporary pullback or correction before the overall trend resumes.
Exactly. And traders use Fibonacci ratios such as 38.2%, 50%, and 61.8% to identify potential support and resistance levels where the price might reverse. They see these levels as potential turning points in the market.
Okay, I can see how that could be useful information. But how accurate are these Fibonacci levels? Do they really predict price movements reliably?
Like any technical analysis tool, Fibonacci retracements aren't foolproof. They're just one piece of the puzzle. And their effectiveness depends on a variety of factors,
Sure.
including market conditions and the trader's own interpretation of the patterns.
So it's not like a magical formula for getting rich quick. It's more about using these mathematical tools to gain a different perspective on the market
Exactly.
and potentially identify opportunities.
Precisely. It's all about understanding the potential for patterns and recognizing that those patterns don't always play out as expected.
This is all so fascinating. We've seen how math can be used to analyze patterns in nature engineering and even financial markets. It's like math is this underlying code that governs so many aspects of our world.
And what's truly amazing is that we're still discovering new connections and applications for these mathematical concepts. Who would have thought that the Fibonacci sequence, something observed in ancient times, would have relevance in modern cryptography or stock market analysis?
It really makes you wonder what other mathematical secrets are still out there waiting to be discovered. What really struck me throughout our conversation today?
What's that?
It's that final thought you shared in the first part, the idea that there might be mathematical patterns hidden within our own lives, not just in the external world.
It's a thought-provoking idea, isn't it? It suggests that math isn't just some external force, it's something deeply intertwined with who we are and how we experience the world.
It definitely is. I've been thinking about it ever since, and I've started to notice these little patterns popping up in my own life. Things I never really paid attention to before.
Like what? Give me some examples. I'm curious to hear what you've observed.
For example, I've been tracking my sleep schedule lately, and I swear there's a Fibonacci-like pattern in the number of hours I sleep each night. It's not exact, of course.
Yeah.
But there's a definite rhythm to it that seems to follow a similar pattern.
That's fascinating. There's actually a growing body of research suggesting that many biological processes often follow mathematical patterns.
Really? I had no idea.
Yes, circadian rhythms, for example. The natural cycles of sleep and wakefulness are governed by complex feedback loops that can be modeled mathematically.
So maybe my sleep pattern isn't just random. Maybe it's actually following some deeper mathematical principle. It's a wild thought, but it makes sense.
It's definitely possible, and it's not just sleep patterns. Other biological processes like cell division and even the spread of diseases have been shown to exhibit mathematical patterns. It's like our bodies are these incredibly intricate mathematical machines.
Wow, That's incredible. But what about our behavior? Do you think our decisions, the paths we choose in life, could also be influenced by mathematical principles?
Now, that's a really intriguing question, and I think it's worth exploring. There's a field called behavioral economics that actually uses mathematical models to understand how people make decisions.
I've heard of behavioral economics, but I always thought it was more about psychology than math.
It's a blend of both. Behavioral economists use mathematical tools like game theory and probability to analyze how people weigh risks and rewards, how they make choices under uncertainty, and how they interact with each other.
So maybe there are mathematical equations out there that can predict how we'll behave in certain situations. Is that what you're saying?
Human behavior is incredibly complex, so I wouldn't say there's a simple equation for everything, but mathematical models can certainly help us understand the underlying principles that often drive our decisions.
This is really blowing my mind. I love this idea that math can provide insights into not just the physical world, but also the inner workings of our minds.
And I think this connection between math and human behavior has profound implications for fields like marketing, politics, even education.
Absolutely. If we can understand the mathematical patterns that influence our choices, we could create more effective strategies for communication, persuasion, and learning.
Imagine being able to design educational programs that are perfectly tailored to the way our brains naturally process information.
That would be revolutionary. It would completely transform how we learn and teach.
Exactly, and this is just one example of the potential applications of this emerging field.
Okay, so we've covered biological patterns and human behavior. What other areas of our lives might exhibit mathematical patterns? What other avenues should we explore?
I think relationships are an incredibly fascinating area to consider. The dynamics between people are incredibly complex, but perhaps there are underlying mathematical principles that can help us understand how relationships form, evolve, and sometimes even dissolve.
Are you suggesting there might be a mathematical formula for love? That's a pretty wild thought.
Not exactly a formula, of course, but maybe there are mathematical models that can capture certain aspects of relationships, like the balance of give and take or the patterns of communication.
It's like a mathematical love language. I love that idea.
Me too. And this isn't just theoretical. There are researchers out there who are using mathematical tools to study relationship dynamics and social networks.
This is incredible. This deep dive has taken us on such an amazing journey, from Fibonacci spirals in nature to the hidden mathematical patterns within our own lives.
And I think the key takeaway is this math is so much more than just formulas and equations. It's a way of thinking, a lens through which we can view and understand the world around us and within us.
Absolutely. And by embracing this way of thinking, we can unlock hidden connections, make surprising discoveries, and perhaps even gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the universe we live in.
Exactly. So as you go about your day, I encourage you to look for those hidden patterns, those subtle mathematical principles that might be shaping your experiences, your choices, and your connections with others.
You never know what you might find. That's the beauty of math. It's an endless journey of exploration and discovery. This deep dive has really opened up a whole new way of seeing the world for me.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
We uncovered all these unexpected connections between Fibonacci sequences and cryptography and engineering and financial markets, even the patterns in our own lives.
It really shows you the power of math to reveal the hidden structures and relationships that shape our reality.
What started as a deep dive into the Fibonacci sequence has turned into this incredible exploration of how math connects to so many different aspects of our world.
It's amazing.
And ourselves.
It really makes you realize that math isn't just some abstract subject confined to textbooks.
Right.
It's a fundamental language that helps us make sense of the universe and our place within it.
One of the most fascinating takeaways for me has been this idea of viewing things through both continuous and discrete lenses, and how those perspectives can reveal different kinds of patterns and insights.
It's like having two different sets of tools for understanding the world.
Correct.
Sometimes the continuous lens, like calculus, helps us see the smooth flow of change and motion. Other times, the discrete lens, like modulo arithmetic, helps us break things down into manageable units and uncover those hidden structures.
And it seems like the most interesting discoveries often happen when we blend these two perspectives, when we find ways to bridge that gap between the continuous and the discrete.
You're absolutely right. The Fibonacci sequence itself is a perfect example of this.
Yeah.
We can visualize it as a continuous spiral, but we can also analyze it in a discrete way using modulo arithmetic.
Yeah.
And those two perspectives complement each other, giving us a richer understanding of its properties and applications.
I'm also really intrigued by this whole idea that mathematical principles might actually be at play in our own lives,
Yeah.
shaping our decisions, our relationships, even the paths we choose.
It's a thought-provoking idea, isn't it?
It is.
It suggests that math is more than just a tool for describing the external world. It might also be a key to understanding our inner world, the way we think and feel and interact with others.
There's this hidden mathematical code influencing our choices, our patterns of behavior,
Yeah.
even the connections we form with other people.
It raises so many fascinating questions.
Yeah. What kinds of mathematical patterns can we find in our daily lives?
Exactly.
Can we actually use math to predict our own behavior or the dynamics of our relationships?
These are questions that scientists and researchers are just beginning to explore, but I think the possibilities are incredibly exciting.
I do too. This is really mind-blowing stuff.
It is.
This deep dive has taken us on such an amazing journey.
It has.
From Fibonacci spirals in nature to the hidden mathematical patterns within our own lives.
And I think the key takeaway here is this.
Yeah.
Math is so much more than just formulas and equations.
Right.
It's a way of thinking, a lens through which we can view and understand the world around us and within us.
Absolutely. And by embracing that way of thinking, we can unlock hidden connections.
Yes.
Make surprising discoveries, and perhaps even gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the universe we live in.
I couldn't have said it better myself. This deep dive has been an incredible journey, and I hope it has inspired our listeners to see the world through a mathematical lens.
To look for those hidden patterns.
Yes.
To question their assumptions, and to embrace the mystery and wonder of mathematics. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.